Hello and welcome to this presentation on effective use of PowerPoints. Now, you've all seen bad PowerPoint presentations. And when I meet a face-to-face class and have us discuss these topics, a number of answers come up. Think in your mind, what are the things that signal bad presentations? And I'll tell you that some of the common answers are too much text on a slide. Is that one that you were thinking about? Text that's hard to read because it's too small. Is that one you were thinking about? Text where the foreground color and background color don't look good. Some people don't like the animations on slides. They think they're distracting, not helpful. A number of things. And then the presentation itself. People don't like when the presenter reads the PowerPoint slides to the audience. The presenters don't like when the PowerPoint's given the presentation, and the presenter is just there almost as a bystander, like they don't even know what's going on, and on and on. So there's a lot of ways to use PowerPoint to give a bad presentation. All right, so looking at this guy, is this a good presentation or a bad presentation? I think we'd generally all agree this is probably going to be a bad presentation. This guy might be the CEO of a Fortune 100 company and the smartest person in the room, but the way he's using his PowerPoint, a slide that's too busy, a slide that you can't tell what the meaning is, he's probably even if he is the smartest person in the room, the way he's using PowerPoint is not helping him communicate. So the problem of PowerPoint is well known. For over a decade, people have been talking about ways to get better PowerPoint presentations. Seth Godin is one of the people that made a name for himself early on in social media. This was one of the topics that he brought up as effective PowerPoints. He traveled around to businesses and trained businesses on how to use PowerPoint effectively. He wrote some books and some blogs on this. And Seth Godin's advice was this. He said a slide should have no bullets. The slide should have one point. You as the presenter, what's the point you're trying to make with this slide? And it can have text, not bulleted text. You can have text that just fits on the slide. This slide follows his recommendations. There are no bullets on the slide. There's one point. The point is be simple, right? Keep your presentation clear. And it has 4 words and 2 digits, or 6 words on it. Another author, speaker, public speaker, book author, professional motivational speaker that goes around to businesses was Garr Reynolds, and he also made a name, helped promote his brand through his understanding and advice on PowerPoint. And Garr's advice was this. He's famous for the term presentation Zen. And Zen is more of a feeling of balance and inner rightness than it is a rule, a formula, something that you follow precisely. Right? So it's more inner resonance that's good, and the stacked rocks there, kind of a Zen thing. So it's even less formal than what we saw before. Right? This is it just feels right. And what happens in presentation Zen in both approaches is that they tend to be much more visual and much less text. So here's my balance between these two. Be visual and keep it simple. And without telling you exactly how visual is visual and how simple is simple, this is just the general direction that I want you to go when you're creating a PowerPoint presentation. I want you to think, be as visual as I can be, keep it as simple. Can I be more visual? Then go more visual. Can I be more visual than that? Go more visual than that. Can it be simpler? Make it simpler. Right? And if you do this, if you make your presentations as visual as possible and as simple as possible, you'll find that PowerPoint is a complement rather than an antagonist for your presentation. So let me give you some examples. Here's example number 1. This is a slide that I see, a common slide that I might get from a student's presentation on a topic. In this case, it's talking about Albert Einstein. Now, the reason that they might be talking about Albert Einstein is because of what he did with relativity. And right now, even as you're listening, part of your brain is wanting to read the text on the slide, and part of your brain is wanting to listen to what I'm saying. And you can't do both at the same time. Because the same part of our brain, the left hemisphere of our brain that we use to process language, we need to use that same part of the brain to process written language, just like we do audio spoken language. And it's just like two people are talking at you at the same time. A PowerPoint slide text is like a person talking. And you as the speaker are a person talking. So the listener has to decide, do I listen to the PowerPoint slide, listen to the text on the PowerPoint slide, process it with my left hemisphere of my brain, or do I listen to the speaker? You can't do both. This slide fights with you as a presenter. If I've got all this text, they're going to try to read this text. So I could pull the text up and not say anything and just sit there quietly and let them read it. I could pull this up and read it to them, but we already know that people don't like being read to. But the thing is, visuals use the right part of our brain, the right hemisphere, and they're less distracting. So what is it that I really want to say? What was my point about Albert Einstein? So I might say, well, I want to talk about him. Here's a great quote, one of my favorite Albert Einstein quotes. Everything should be as simple as possible, but no simpler. It's got an image, right? So this isn't fighting. So this pops up on the screen in just a second or so. The person can see that, and then they can start listening to me. And I can say the reason I want to tell you about Albert Einstein is because he invented relativity, or he formalized the theory of relativity about how space-time warps as objects move closer to the speed of light, or whatever it is. I mean, I have to have as a speaker a reason I'm talking about Albert Einstein. This slide captures your attention rather than taking it away from me as a speaker. So this is visual and it's simple. Can I make it more visual? Yeah. Right? So make it as visual as you can. How hard is it to make this slide? It's really easy. Right? You start with a blank slide and you find a high resolution image off the internet. If you're just doing it for an academic purpose, you're not doing it for any kind of a sales pitch, any kind of profit financial motive. If it's just for educational communication, you can grab an image off the internet, have it as part of an academic presentation. Typically, you want to get a high resolution image that and not shrink it and not stretch it. So if you have to resize it, make sure you keep the proportions, because it doesn't look good when it's distorted like silly putty, too long or too tall. So you keep the relative dimensions, the height to width dimensions the same, get it to be high resolution enough that it fits on the screen without being able to see the individual pixels. And then that little text box, that's just a shape. I think that's just a shape. It can either be a text box or it can be a rectangle shape that you add text to. Either way, on both of those objects, when you add them to your slide, you can add text to it. You can format the text. You can make the square shape, or you can make the text box itself have a color with a transparency on it. So that's probably a 50% gray transparency. Right? It's really easy. If you don't have the slide already created, it's really easy to create that slide. Let me give you a second example. Be visual, keep it simple. So I want to talk to you about racism. Right? Racism is the belief that inherent different traits in human racial groups, it justifies discrimination. In modern English language, right, the term racism is used predominantly as a pejorative epithet. It is applied especially to the practice of advocacy of racial discrimination. Right? So I'm sitting here, I'm reading this slide to you. You see what's on the slide. I'm saying the exact same. You get bored by doing this. If I want to talk to you about racism, I should use PowerPoint as a tool to capture your attention and draw your attention back to me. So I just say, we need to talk about racism. Racism is a problem in America today. Right? The idea that you're going to judge somebody as better or worse based on their racial background or their gender or some other issue. Right? And immediately this slide captures your attention. And it makes you, as an audience member, our minds naturally wander. And PowerPoint, used effectively, very visual, minimal text, keep it simple, can draw your attention back, right? It pulls them back to what you as a speaker want to say. Now, on this slide, I should have some good point that I want to make about racism. I put it in my presentation, I need to have a point. This gets the attention, and then I, the speaker, make whatever point I want to make about racism. And I could have used this slide, I could have used this slide, right? Just some kind of a slide that highly visual, captures the emotion, the right brain attention of my audience member, and that gets them listening to my voice, which is their left brains, the language, and I'm communicating with the whole brain, the whole person. Example number 3, be visual, keep it simple. So here's a slide that's very simple, right? It's talking about financial distribution. It's got 1 point, 2% of the world owns 50% of the wealth, which is an interesting fact that creates, worth discussing. Is that good? Is that bad? Can we change anything about it? Whatever. It doesn't have a bullet. It's got a piece of clip art there with dollars and coins. But this slide probably feels wrong to you. It certainly does to me. Clip art is so, early 2000s, right? Clip art is so dated. Once we got away from those old floppy disks and we started getting USB drives that could store, gigabytes of data on them, presentations could get bigger. Images take more. A good high quality graphic image is going to take up more space than clip art. Clip art was visual when storage was expensive and you were limited to floppy disks, little 3.5-inch floppy disks. Now I can do the same message here, right? But I can use a image, a high resolution image, which resonates much more with you as the listener. I can say the exact same thing, 2% of the world owns 50% of the wealth. And again, I added text and changed the format and font, just what kind of looked and felt right to me, just using white space and empty space on the slide. And I've got the other one at the bottom that does have the transparency, 50% transparency, or probably even 70% transparency. You can see through it very easily there. And just pick because there's a zenness to it. It's not a formula. It's just kind of I like the way this feels. And that actually tells you a little bit about me as a presenter as well, that I chose to use that font, that style, right? There's an artistic element, a right brain artistic element here. And I'm communicating with you as the speaker in the left brain. It's such a way to communicate with your audience in a holistic manner by using PowerPoint. PowerPoint used correctly helps you be a better presenter. Used incorrectly, it fights with you as a presenter. So this fourth example, I want to talk about two people, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. These are both famous individuals who in the 1970s started their businesses. Bill Gates started Microsoft in the 1970s. Steve Jobs started Apple in the 1970s. Part of the microcomputer or personal computer revolution in the late 70s. And those companies grew in the 80s, and they became, incredibly rich people. One of the top 10 richest people in the world, probably at one point. I don't know if I think Jobs probably was top 10 at one point. I know Gates was number one at some point. Steve Jobs, of course, has passed on. Bill Gates is still alive, and he and his wife, Melinda Gates, are part of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where they're being philanthropic with their billions and billions of dollars, giving away over 90%, I think, of their accumulated wealth. So these are similar people. They're part of the boom of the personal computer industry in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, and 90s and on. Steve Jobs, of course, was with Apple and did the iPhone and the iPad and all those things. But the reason I'm bringing them up now is as speakers, one of them was a famously outstanding public speaker. And the other one of these two men was infamously bad and cringeworthy as a public speaker. This isn't about intelligence. This is about their ability to stand in front of a room of people and give a compelling presentation. And the one that was really, really good, I think you might know this, was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs would give the keynote address at the end of the annual Apple presentation every year from the late 90s into the 2000s when he passed away. And this is the time when they introduced the iPhone, they introduced the iPad, they introduced the music device in I think it was the early 2000s, right? And he would announce these products at the end during these annual conferences. And he was such a good presenter. And look at this slide, right? It just says iPhone. It's so simple. And he would speak, and he knew exactly, and he practiced. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. And then when he had a new point to make, the slide would change, and it would have just enough information. It was as simple as possible, but no simpler. It was visual. It was just what you needed to go, right? And it just drew your attention back immediately, and he was well prepared. He knew what he was going to say, and it was great. Steve Jobs was a great public speaker. Bill Gates, not so much. Now, Bill Gates is trying here, right? This presentation has no bullet points. This presentation, this PowerPoint slide, it's visual, but there's just so much going on. It's not simple, right? It's almost work to look at that slide and try to figure out what he's trying to say. And he wasn't a very good communicator on top of that. So being a bad communicator with bad slides, he gave bad presentations. Here he is talking about digital lifestyle and digital work style, and he's talking about those things, and he's got a visual background. But I look at that, and that doesn't draw my attention to make me want to hear his point. I'm just studying that graphic in the background, and it looks like a Pepto-Bismol upset stomach commercial. I mean, he might be telling me the best news in the world, how to get a free new laptop, and I can't even pay attention to him because I'm just looking and thinking, does that person have, upset stuff? What's going on there? Does that person need to run to a bathroom? I don't know, right? It's the difference between knowing how to use the presentation tool the way Steve Jobs knew how to use it, and not the way that Bill Gates did not know how to use it. One more example here on how to use PowerPoint effectively. Realize that this is what's happening in industry. Companies know that being visual and keep it simple is the way to give presentations. And in fact, if you give a presentation that's highly visual and you keep it simple, what you're doing, and you're able to use this as a tool to get people's attention, and then you're able to have a clear message when you speak, you might end up getting a job just based on that. Seriously. If there's somebody watching your presentation that's looking to hire somebody to tell the story of their company, of their products, of what they're doing, right? And public speaking, communication is a big part of what a lot of jobs are. If you demonstrate that you understand how to be a communicator and how to use PowerPoint effectively and how to have a message and how to get people's attention, you very well might get a job offer from somebody that says, I need people like you working for me because you know how to communicate. So here's an example of being visual, keep it simple. It's happening all across every industry. This was Western's homepage a couple years ago, right? Not that long ago. And it was a typical homepage for a couple years ago, right? It's got a nice picture of the bell tower. It's got all the links to all the information that we need. But it just feels kind of busy, It doesn't feel fresh. It doesn't feel today. It feels dated. Here's Western's homepage today. They changed it to make it more visual and to keep it simple. And all the information you need, you can find. There's a search button up there at the very top right. You can search it. Everything's there, but it doesn't overwhelm you. Right now, an image, a right brain emotional connection. That's the main thing you're getting with this. You're not in a left brain spaghetti haze of facts, and it just works so much better. Slideshare.net is a great place to visit. If you've never been there, this is a community-based, open source place that anybody can upload a presentation and share a presentation. If you go to slideshare.net right now, you'll see there'll be a few presentations that are at the top level. And if you click on one of these, most of them are going to be more visual with minimal text. Now, there's no requirement. You could intentionally create a terrible presentation and upload it to slideshare.net, and there's nobody that's going to block your presentation or say it's no good. But it's just the fact that people that are doing professional presentations are moving toward this highly visual minimal text model. And they also tend to be people that like to share their work on slideshare.net. So if you go there, you'll just get an example of these more visual presentations. And a really cool thing about slideshare.net is you can search for a topic that you're giving a presentation on. So if you're giving a presentation on World War II tanks, right? There might be a presentation on SlideShare about that. If you're giving a presentation on marketing strategies, there's a number of presentations there on that. If you're giving a presentation on artificial intelligence and data mining, there's a presentation on there, a number of them on there, right? And you can click on these and be inspired for your own presentations. And you can download some of these presentations. Don't just take somebody else's presentation and give it like it's your own. But these people are sharing the presentation, so they're okay with you using some of their slides. But pick and choose, be selective, right? This is your voice, your message, your story. So get some hints, some help, right? You don't have to start from scratch, but at the same time, don't just give somebody else's presentation, but be inspired by these presentations. So how would you do something like this? If you pulled up if you right now did a Google search and you search for college campus and then went under the images link under Google search, you would find a number of images, including this one, probably on the first page of images. It was there when I did it, a short while ago. It's where I got it from. And as you look at those Google images, you'll see some sizes. If it's like 300 by 600, you don't want that because it's not going to be big enough to fill the slide. If you stretch it to fill the slide, it'll be kind of pixels, right? But if it's 1,000 by something, it's probably big enough of an image that it can fill your PowerPoint slide and look good. And remember, resize it, keep the proportions. Don't silly putty stretch it taller or wider so it looks weird. It's just so much more authentic that it looks like you're looking out a window, right? That doesn't look distorted. So just a blank slide in your presentation, put the image on it, add the image to it. You don't have to do it as the background, just actually add the image over the white background. And then that what are we learning? That's just a text box or a shape where you add text to the shape. And you format the text to make it, 60 point or whatever it is. And, this is just black text with a pretty generic Arial font. I don't know what that is. And there's a transparency on it so you can kind of see the trees behind it. And there's a blue border around it. It's not the most compelling graphics, but it's super easy to create. And you might want to not have the border around yours, or you might want to have the border around yours that's green because I see a lot of green in that more than I see blue. And I might have the text instead of black, the text might be another color that I'm getting from that image somewhere, maybe the tree bark color of brown. Right? There's some things you can kind of do and make it look more authentic. Here's another slide, same thing. Right? So on college campus, the same Google search for images that you were just doing, you might see this image. It's probably on that first set of images. Copy that image, paste it into a new blank slide in your presentation. So I've got another white slide. I put this image on top of it, put a text box on top of that. So these two slides, if I was giving a presentation about joining a campus organization and becoming an officer in my fraternity, in my sorority, in my campus organization as a way of doing, looking good on a resume, preparing yourself for a job afterward or something like that. Right? These kinds of slides could help capture people's attention, right brain emotion, and then I'm speaking and saying, join our club, become an officer in our organization. It'll look great on a resume. It'll give you a chance to take some leadership roles. You have these opportunities, right? So whatever the message is I'm trying to make, you can make those presentations. You can make your message better if you're using PowerPoint effectively. What do those symbols mean? How about less equals more? When you're creating a presentation, remember that less is more. Visual is emotional. It captures the right brain of the audience. And less text is better because you're the one with the message. You're the one with the words. And having less text and more visual makes PowerPoint your partner, not your enemy, in your presentation. So if you want to use PowerPoint effectively, communicate with both hemispheres of your audience. The right hemisphere, visuals connect with them better than you can do. It draws in attention. It brings them back to what you are doing. If every new slide has or it doesn't have to be just image after image, but if you need to have a text, if you need to have a chart, then have a text, have a chart, right? Do whatever your presentation is, but don't go too long until you get a really heavy image slide just to bring it back in, right? Just to keep that emotional connection. And then you practice your message. You practice your presentation. You practice the words you're going to use. You practice the speed at which you're going to speak. And bring those two together, and you will give a great PowerPoint presentation.